Hey there. In this module, I'm going to guide you through the art and science of improving on-site event execution and technical coordination. I'll be speaking first and foremost from my own experience earned through sweat equity, seeing what worked well and not so well. If you are a senior association planner, a senior corporate planner, event service provider, even a field technician, or just basically anyone who has a hand in complex events, and you want to elevate your on-site game, cool. You're in the right place. We're going to tackle 5 key areas together that will help change the world through amplifying an event's successes. Before we do, I want to say that we're in a fork in the road. This is a starting point. You'll be able to dive even deeper in coming modules because we're kicking things into a higher gear to close out the year. We'll have each of these 5 key areas built into deeper dives, accompanying other prescription modules that'll be released later. We struggled with keeping this in the time parameters of 1 release a month, so we just gave up and decided to treat this as a feeder course for all things logistics. And you can dive into deeper knowledge in the 5 specific areas and modules hitting the runway by signing up for our monthly newsletter. Okay, I plugged it, so let's move on. Okay, so what are those 5 key areas? I'm glad you asked. On-site operations and logistics, the backbone that keeps everything running smooth. Crew management systems, how we organize and communicate with the people running the show. Event day, run of show. The minute-by-minute game plan that ensures flawless execution. Risk and redundancy planning, preparing for the what-ifs and having backup plans for critical elements. Training new team members, bringing new staff up to speed on all these systems so nothing falls through the cracks. Each section will crack the egg of common friction points that we face, the real-world consequences when things go wrong, and clear, actionable resolutions rooted in best practices. I'm going to reference current data and insights from some of my favorite trusted sources outside of the industry that no one seems to be applying to business events. It's one of my favorite things to do. From folks like McKinsey, PwC, and Ernst & Young, EY. And in case you think we're heading too far off the beaten path, I'll also use and abuse industry experts to back up these strategies as well. It's just practical knowledge that I want you to use within your own organization. The way I see it, the whole world has 2 degrees of separation from the business events industry. And if we can do our jobs better, we have the unique opportunity to look. Let me say it this way. Nothing big moves by the powers of one. But the sustained efforts by many, that can and will change the world. All right, so now that you know the goals, let's jump in and start with the foundation of any successful event. On-site operations and logistics. Logistics may not be glamorous, but it's the engine under the hood of our event. And I'm preaching to the choir a bit here, I know, but it covers everything from venue setup and registration flow to AV equipment, catering deliveries, signage placement, and everything else, all the services operating behind that curtain. And when we talk about on-site operations and logistics, we mean the detailed coordination of people, places, and things at the event venue. And let's explore the pain points here, how they show up on site, and how to solve them. Even seasoned planners know that plenty can go wrong with event operations. Everything that can will. Our first big challenge is just simply the sheer complexity of tasks. You're juggling multiple vendors, the venue, the AV, the F&B, the decorators, and so on, and each having their own schedules and requirements. And communication gaps are common amongst those. A missed email or an incorrect setup diagram, it can cascade into on-site problems. And this one should be no surprise, but last-minute changes are one of the most obvious pain points. Things like late registrations or schedule tweaks can throw off everything that has been carefully planned. And case in point, we're not in a bubble because according to recent PCMA survey, last-minute registrations continue to add to the pressure of executing events. You've seen it. We've all seen it. What that means is that all planners are often scrambling to adjust to logistics on the fly. Additionally, budget constraints intersect with logistics in the most obvious and annoying ways. Maybe you had to cut back on support staff or forgo a wireless printer for on-site badges, and those cuts hurt execution. PCMA 2024 meetings market survey found that budget cuts and rising costs are the top challenges cited by event planners, followed closely by staffing issues and event logistics concerns. This is why what we do is continuously rated as one of the top 5 most stressful jobs. It's a perfect storm. You're expected to deliver a flawless experience, even as resources tighten. And if you're viewing this mid-year 2025, the industry's recent turbulence has reduced the number of skilled workers available and yanked on the scales of the supply chain for going on like 5 years now. Almost every aspect of event setup is taking longer on site now because there are fewer experienced workers available. So if it feels harder than it used to be to get things done on site, you're not imagining things. It is harder. And that's a major pain point we need to acknowledge. Symptoms and consequences. What happened when on-site operations and logistics suffer? You've probably lived this scenario. Setup is behind schedule, so the doors open late. Attendees are left waiting outside a session room for the scenic that was still being set or still wiring up the mics. Or an important signage package goes missing because nobody tracked the shipping and now attendees can't find their workshop room. Or worse yet, your highest paying sponsor's bag inserts went missing. Mismanaged logistics show in very visible ways: delays, confusion, and frustration. And for instance, your team didn't account for those last minute attendee registrations. You might find registration lines swelling unexpectedly with insufficient badges or staff, resulting in long wait times and poor first impressions. What about communication breakdowns? Let's say the lunch buffet location changed, but that message didn't reach your operations lead. Now hundreds of people are wondering because signage and staff were in the wrong place. And these kinds of on-site snafus damage the attendee experience and the event's reputation. There are final consequences too. If you miss an install deadline because of poor coordination, you might incur overtime charges from the venue or their local union labor. You gotta love those triple time markets, right? Hidden costs can blindside you. Planners discover hidden or unexpected fees after budgets had been set, leaving them scrambling to cover them. And that's a symptom of not just budget issues, but also of logistics oversight. One example of that is not clarifying with the facility for dock and freight elevator access times with the event before or after, making sure that there's sufficient time. Sure, you've got the room blocked out, but what about what it takes to actually get to the room? Or here's another one, not including your DMC and the vendor call leading up to the event. Wait. You mean you're not even having an all vendors call before the event? Sorry. Let's bring it back here. Poor logistics leads to chaos. Plain and simple. Program elements start late or get cut. Speakers and VIPs feel disorganized, and attendees get annoyed, and your stress levels go through the roof, and no one wants to be in the boneyard frantically redrawing floor plans on the fly or begging F&B staff for Diet Coke in a Pepsi-only venue moments before the keynote gets into the green room. If you've been there, you know it's something to avoid. Enough with the doom bait, though. How do we tame the logistics beast and avoid those nightmare scenarios, you ask? The key is proactive planning and systems that are robust enough to convey the come what may mentality. From my experience, here are strategies that have run up against real events and worked. Create a master operations plan. Well before the event, develop a detailed logistics plan that maps out every activity, deadline, and responsibility. Every move, every single one, as much as you can. Every person touching it, literally. This is your playbook covering setup and breakdown schedules, vendor delivery times, room layouts, equipment checklists, and contact info. Many planners use spreadsheets or specialized software to track this. Whatever the format, just write it down. A structured plan ensures nothing is left to memory. But remember, build in extra time as a buffer, because as we noted, tasks often take longer now with leaner and less experienced crews. A lesson I learned getting my degree in architecture is when you're developing the details, start with what you know and fill in the gaps, leaving space for things you know exist, but don't know the details for. As you progress in planning, you'll work towards filling in the gaps until you have a solid, structured run of show and operations playbook. Improve vendor coordination and communication. Communication can make or break an on-site execution. Please hold a thorough pre-conference meeting, or preferably a series of meetings, with all vendors and key team members. Ideally, this would look something like meeting every 2 months until you get to about 6 months out from moving, every month from there forward. And then you probably want to meet weekly in the last like 6 or so weeks before you move in. In these meetings, walk through the event timeline and logistics in detail. You want to confirm who needs access to the venue when, and who is responsible for each aspect of setup. One best practice is to reconfirm all critical arrangements in writing, especially venue specifics. For example, double check your room assignments and setup times. This is the process of closing that gap in the planning process. Each participant should ask questions on anything that is not rock solid information and to communicate what they currently have as rock solid information each meeting. It's going to sound super redundant, but it is so incredibly valuable. I'm going to use PCMA Convene here again. They warn that some venues juggling multiple rebookings have accidentally double booked meeting rooms. And their advice is to reconfirm your meeting rooms by name as far in advance as you can to avoid fun little surprises. And while I've thankfully never seen that, I've personally sorted out the rat's nest of a dismantle overlapping with an install for another event in the same space. Well, the one working freight elevator broke down and the dock workers had a screaming match over venue access. But you know, that's a story for another day. These meetings are also your opportunity to clarify any additional costs now, when you actually have time and options. Don't wait until on site to learn about power drop fees or mandatory rigging labor. But just ask the question point blank. Are there any charges or rules that I haven't asked about yet? Things like that can save you from on-site budget nightmares. Look, using the word, just do whatever it takes, is one of the most expensive sentences rolled off someone's tongue while they're on the show floor. And I'll say this though, do whatever it takes to avoid that sentence. During the event, keep communication tight and constant. What you want to do is establish a primary communication channel for fast firefighting, something like a dedicated radio line or a messaging app group that all of the on-site leads can use. In this way, if the schedule shifts or a problem arises, everyone hears about it immediately. Never blame casting, but just talking about problems and solution options. Clear and consistent communication keeps the team aligned and prevents small issues from becoming much bigger ones. Leverage technology for logistics. In case you're now joining us from living under a rock, we now live in a digital age. So use all of those tools. Integrated event management technology can dramatically streamline on-site operations. Think of tools that tie together your registration data, your scheduling, and your communication. Wait, you don't have that? Think about it this way. A good event management platform can push real-time updates to a mobile app that staff use, ensuring that everyone has the latest info on schedule or room changes. Something that simple, but it can have a profound effect. The most obvious is that the automation reduces manual work. Maybe you automate attendee check-in with QR codes to cut wait times. Or you use a project management app with task reminders for your team. Even Google Docs allows for notifications. Please, just use something, whatever it is, something. Smart automation reduces bottlenecks. Even simple uses of tech help dramatically. Shared cloud folders for key documents so that your latest floor plan or schedule is accessible to everybody that's on the team. Here's another one. Sync your drayage and receiving team with everyone else through a simple freight check-in process. It could be just a Google Doc instead of a triplicate carbon paper. And best of all, you can stop the game of, dude, where's my freight? The goal is to minimize human error and the slinky effect of data distribution, which, if we're being honest, both are just speeding up information flow by another name. And to severely oversimplify things, that's what AI does. It connects different data sets and analyzes the information here in the middle. We're at a point in industrial digital transformation that you could be charged with abuse for not progressively integrating technology. And if you're saying you haven't used any AI, you probably don't know that you are. If you text someone and click on the suggested word that pops up, you're using AI. If you haven't used a large language model, my best word of advice is to use it like you would Google. Ask any questions. And when you don't know what it's telling you, Tell it you don't know what the hell it's telling you. You don't know what it's talking about. Basically, just remove the filter between your thoughts and what you think you need to structure your chat with, and you'll have a better result. I mean, look, I'm an AI power user, but I'm not here to dive into AI. That's a whole other ballgame that we just don't have time for today. What I want you to do on that is search for Nick Borelli's content with Zenus. He'll get you started on that rabbit hole. Or just honestly slip me a direct message. All right, what I will say on all of this is that when data flows seamlessly, whether from the dock to bag stuffers, to the F&B, to the show manager, or your registration system, or the badge printing station, you free up time and reduce mistakes and increase that golden item that is time, something we're lacking constantly. With more time, you can maybe forecast change instead of reacting to it, which means you have options when previously you had, I don't know, zero. Think of these tools like a puppy. They're so cute and you love them, but you also need to train them and your team on how they fit with your house's morning routine. You wake up, you make a cup of coffee, go for a walk, take a shower. Basically, don't be dumb. Don't get a Greyhound for your Anchorage, Alaska apartment. Also, don't adopt 14 puppies at once because you'll need to quit your day job just to make sure they don't destroy the house. Okay, tech won't literally chew up your shoes, but it will figuratively crap on the bed while you're trying to sleep in it, eating up the time that you were trying to gain through efficiency because its integration is now demanding more attention and time than you were setting aside for it. So what I'm saying is, don't just immerse yourself in change dynamics, riding the digital wave and burn all paper and turn your back on reliability of processes and systems that were pre-existing, no matter how antiquated. A great mentor of mine used to say, never try something new on the road. Test it in a controlled, simulated environment and plan for failures. Still print blank 22 by 28 signs, even though the meeting rooms all have digital signs. Still print paper room sets because without fail, your device will die 15 minutes before the doors open, and you're not sure if the room flipped at 9 a.m. today or tomorrow, or if it was supposed to have rounds, or you moved the right speaker into the right room for classroom style. I've seen time and time again where there's a rally behind a moonshot savior tech, but the harsh realities of integration tend to be 1.5 to 3 times the onboarding time of what was actually projected, because it's dependent on your ability to onboard it. And you probably don't have a full-time seat for someone who knows both your event or your organization and the tech intimately enough to go pick out curtains together. One of the bigger truths that I've found is that technology amplifies the organization. If you have good processes and a team that's adaptable to change, it will amplify that. But it too will amplify the faults. And those processes that are not yet fully built, that you've been using a good person to cover up a bad process, that works for simple, but it creates a brittle organization that has a tendency to shatter rather than stretch when you grow. And this leads me to the next area. Anticipate and adapt. No matter how detailed your plan, on event day, you'll need to be nimble. Build a culture among your on-site team of trust through verification. I've learned long ago that no matter how great Steve is, he's only human. And last I checked, I am too. And we've got a high chance of miscommunicating last-minute switches. What you want to do is encourage everyone to think a few steps ahead if they can. For example, if you know a VIP speaker is arriving at the loading dock, have someone there early to greet them and escort them in. Don't just assume it'll happen automatically. Make sure that you've verified that that person is there and they're ready to go. Keep an eye on the timelines as the day progresses. And if one session runs a little bit long, quietly start adjusting downstream timing or break durations, those things that have the flexibility, so that you can catch up and you're not pushing the whole schedule all the way through the day. Basically, monitor and adapt in real time. Many planner pros run a quick operations huddle early at each morning of the event, just to review the day's schedule, any carryovers from the previous day, and any overnight changes. Then another 2 hours before the day wraps, they throw another one to reorient for the next day's activities. And this primes the team to be alert and proactive. Also, what you want to do is empower your team to make quick decisions. If pivot tables are missing, your staff should feel able to reach out to providers directly and initiate a backup plan without waiting for explicit approval while the clock is ticking. And this comes from good training and trust. Remember, logistics is all about detail management. If we sweat the details ahead of time, we sweat less once we get to the show site on the day of. As one piece of McKinsey research puts it, organizations that excel in operational effectiveness reap rewards. 25% higher productivity and 20% lower operating costs than their peers. For events, that productivity translates into smoother, more efficient execution. I love it. Tell me, what would you do with 25% more time and 20% more budget? On-site operations and logistics are the quiet work that makes the loud successes possible. By methodically planning, communicating, using technology, and staying agile, we're able to solve the hidden problems before they explode in front of our attendees. And just like Batman, we operate in the shadows. Now, even with rock-solid logistics plans, we need an equally solid team to execute. So next, let's talk about managing the people side of our equation, the crew and staff on site. We have our master plan and schedule in hand, but who's actually carrying out that plan? Let's shift to how we organize and coordinate our event crew to ensure all those logistics actually happen as intended. As an event leader, you're essentially the director of a small army during an on-site execution. Now, no matter how big the event, or if you have a leader stacked above you, it's a repeating hierarchy that scales up based on what one person can manage successfully. And successfully is the key word there, okay? Crew management is about systematically organizing your staff, vendors, and volunteers so that everyone knows their role, communicates effectively, and works in unison. And in this section, I'll use crew broadly to mean all the human resources working the event, whether it's your internal team, hired contractors, venue staff, or volunteer helpers. They are finite, just like an inventory of tables and chairs, and they have to be managed to last through the marathon of the event. And let's look at common pain points in managing an event crew, the symptoms when things go awry, and how to build an ideal system that keeps the team firing on all cylinders. One of the biggest challenges in crew management today is understaffing and skill gaps, because we lost about 30% of our workforce through the pandemic. The senior level experts across the board. They're all in short supply. And that means you might be working with a leaner team than before, or with personnel who are just less seasoned. For example, the AV technician or event coordinator assigned to you might be newer and juggling multiple events. The carpenter stapling table skirts may only be able to prep 5 per hour instead of 60. Short staffing leads directly to stretched crews. Another pain point is no-shows and last-minute changes in personnel. It's unfortunately common that a few scheduled staff or volunteers don't show up, or they call in sick, and sometimes literally on event morning. Another pain point is unclear roles and communication channels. If crew members aren't 100% sure who is doing what, tasks fall through the cracks, or fall to someone else who plays the game of telephone until it finally finds that right person they're supposed to talk to, burning oh so precious time that none of those people in that chain will ever get back. And you might have security thinking, the venue staff will handle crowd control, while venue staff think it's your volunteer's job. And in the end, nobody handled it at all. Miscommunication can also occur without a solid system. Things like important messages, like a change in schedule or a VIP need. They don't reach the right person in time. And we've probably all seen that scenario where a staffer says, well, no one told me we needed an extra table on stage. Well, in fact, an email was sent, but maybe they weren't on that email chain, or they missed the briefing. And limiting communication channels eliminates the potential of things getting lost either way. Speaking of voluminous communication, our last highlighted pain point is crew fatigue and morale. Live events are grueling. Long days on your feet, high pressure, constant problem solving. And if we don't manage our crew's workload and stress, they can burn out or start making mistakes. Overworked crew members might skip essential steps, like neglecting a sound check before they're racing to set up the next thing. Or they communicate tersely, it's a little too harsh, causing friction. And that can then spread down the chain for everybody else that person talks to. And in some, without a good crew management system, we face understaffed positions, confused responsibilities, and just missed cues and a tired, uninformed team. It's a recipe for operational trouble. I try to ask the question as much as I can. Did you get much sleep last night? Because studies have shown that ongoing sleep loss impairs one's ability to just make simple decisions. When you have a multi-day event, it's extremely important to allow for reset days whenever possible, so that you can keep at least someone on your crew that's fresh. Symptoms and consequences. You can tell when crew management is failing because you see it and you feel it through the event. The classic symptom is tasks not getting done or getting done twice. No one tended to the lounge coffee refresh because each team thought someone else had it. Or alternatively, 2 people ran off to handle the same minor issue, leaving 2 areas unattended. And these hiccups stem from unclear delegation. Another symptom here is delays in responsiveness. If a projector goes black in a session room and it takes 15 minutes for an AV tech to respond, it might be because the message didn't reach the right person. Maybe the room host didn't know who to call, or radio protocols weren't established. Miscommunication is often a fault when problems linger. A well-managed crew operates like a fire brigade. Quick, coordinated responses. And if that's not happening, something's off in your system. Look, it's not simply about the communication and ownership, but the strong value that comes in acknowledgement of responsibility. My wife and I use this one for our 2-year-old all the time, and you can have it free of charge. If one person says, "She's yours," the other must respond with, "Got it." What that translates to is no assumptions of communication. Take that one onto show site, and it is fruitful. This way you have one owner that's able to step away for another thing, and they know that a post is still being managed. What you also want to do is watch for crew members looking lost or idle. If volunteers or staff are standing around unsure of what to do, or if they're asking attendees what's supposed to happen next, yikes. That's a clear sign instructions were insufficient. And on the flip side, you might see overwhelmed individuals, like your poor reg manager who hasn't had a backup in 10 hours. They're now frantically juggling multiple tasks and dropping balls. It's a consequence of not balancing the workload or having redundancy in roles. And one real world consequence of inadequate crew management when a last minute change requires the team to drop mic audio, run screen audio, and cut house lights to allow for an on-screen video to take center stage. And it was in the last minute show notes, but it wasn't shared to the techs. Instead, lights stayed focused on the speaker as they loudly chugged their iced coffee on stage after 20 minutes of talking. And the video sponsor is pissed. The speaker is embarrassed and the production company got a black eye. If you hear communication like, "I thought you were handling that," then you know crew coordination has broken down. In worst case, these issues not only affect the attendee experience, but can pose safety risks. Like if no staff is clearly in charge of emergency evacuation because it just wasn't assigned. All right, in case you zoned out for the last few minutes, here's the TLDR version. When crew management fails, it manifests as confusion, slow reactions to issues, duplicated or missed tasks, stressed staff, poor or wrong decisions, and ultimately a disjointed event execution that every stakeholder feels in their bones. So let's turn that into something actionable, shall we? Building a strong crew management system is like choreographing a dance. Every person should know their cues and timing and how to continue on if or when someone else missteps in the company. Define roles and chain of command. I have 2 quotes to start us off here. Brene Brown said, "Clear is kind, unclear is unkind." But to go further, Tony Robbins said, "Clarity is power." These 2 collectively shape the lives of millions, and these 2 ideas are driving forces for the best way to bring action into clarity. So, before the event, or even before you start the planning cycle, define every vendor, employee, and crew member's role and responsibilities in writing. Create an org chart or hierarchy for the event team. Who reports to who? Who is the point person for specific areas? Registration, stage management, catering, liaison, specialty furniture, so on. For example, you might designate one team member as a floor manager for breakout sessions, and all room hosts and AV techs funnel issues to that floor manager, who then reports major issues to you or the event director. By establishing this chain of command, you can rely on information flowing efficiently and that decisions are made at the right level. Oh, and share this structure with everybody. A simple one-page who to call list can save precious minutes in a crisis. And I'm a visual thinker though, so a flowchart goes one step further. If a crew member knows exactly who to alert, it speeds up resolution and avoids 5 people all scrambling separately, burning precious time, duplicating efforts. Also, communicate the escalation path. Here's an example. A guest gets injured and someone tells the Red staff. They then notify the security lead immediately, who will contact emergency services if needed, and then informs the director of events. When roles are well defined, accountability increases and confusion drops. Staffing levels and redundancy. Aim to be slightly overstaffed rather than understaffed, within budget reasons, of course. It's often wise to have a buffer of extra help, especially for critical function. Dave Lutz at Velvet Chainsaw had an article in Convene a few years back that I really like. If you need 20, get 25, because no-show rates can be high. The same goes for paid staff or contractors. If losing one AV tech would cripple your support, see if you can budget a floater tech or arrange with the AV company to have an on-call standby. Redundancy in crew is insurance. Some may say waste, but those are the folks who will eventually see failure, right? It also allows you to rotate people for breaks without losing sight in other areas. And please, 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 make sure nobody works so long that fatigue sets in before the main event even starts. For multi-day conferences, consider shifts so that fresh staff come in. Additionally, cross-train your team where possible. If only one person knows the nuances of the shipment delivery schedule and they get sick, you're in trouble. I've seen this one firsthand, okay? Put information on a shared doc. Google Docs are your best friend. Train at least 2 people on the tech stack and have at least one backup person who has shadowed that role. We'll talk more about training later, but crew management and training, they go hand in hand here. Briefings and communication. A crew relies on timely information, and a well-managed crew is able to be their best when they have effective briefings and communication tools that work. And effective is the key word there. Start each day or each major shift with a team briefing. In a 10 to 15 minute huddle, the team should come together, or teams by function if you have a beast of a team, and review the day's schedule. Highlight any changes from the original plan and emphasize the key priorities of potential trouble spots. We're expecting a VIP at 2 p.m. at the loading dock. John will handle that escort. Or session A and B are back to back in the same room, so we will need all hands during the quick turnover at 11 a.m. This morning briefing makes sure that everyone begins the day on the same page. And if face-to-face isn't possible for all, share a quick voice message or a group text with bullet points to summarize everything that happened. In ideal scenarios, I'm a big proponent of 2 briefings. One at 10 a.m. to check in, a few hours after the day's start that is only about 5 minutes long, and then having a longer 2 p.m. check-in where you dive into the objectives of the rest of the day. What is off from the run of the show and what needs to be tackled ASAP in the morning. Communication tools are critical through the event, right? So equip your crew with the right tools. Radios, walkie-talkies for instant voice comms, or a group messaging app if the team prefers that. And some events set up a WhatsApp or a Slack channel for their staff. And just make sure that everyone knows how to use the chosen tool and follows the protocols. Establish etiquette like what channel to use and when. And for the love, please use code words for volatile information on those public channels. Clear communication prevents a lot of missteps, but over-communication creates issues too. One more thing, spread updates promptly. If an issue is resolved, let the team know so that we don't have 10 people scouring the bowels of the building in search of a vendor asset that went missing. And if something changes, lunch is pushed 15 minutes later, announce it on the comms so that nobody is in the dark. Basically, keep information flowing freely to all the right people. Let's talk about those right people a little bit more, shall we? Remember, when everyone knows their role, has the info they need, feels supported, the event can practically run itself. Okay, I said practically, all right? But you, as the director, can then step back a bit and focus on high-level oversight rather than firefighting every little issue that's occurring. Sounds good, right? I mean, I think so. And with a solid crew management system, you have an effective team ready to go. Now, let's give that team a clear roadmap for show day. Let's now discuss the event day run of show, your blueprint for Who does what, when, down to the minute. Picture this. It's show day. Attendees are filing in. Speakers are backstage. F&B is on standby for the break. Deco crew are on standby. They've got their feet up with their phones at hand. And you, as the planner, have a detailed script of how the day will unfold. One thing after the other. And that script is the run of show. Sometimes called a production schedule, a show flow, or event cue sheet. It's essentially a minute by minute, or at least segment by segment, timeline of the event program, listing what's happening, who's involved, and any technical cues or notes for each moment that's occurring. And let's identify pain points related to planning and executing the run of show. The consequences of, if it's not done right, and how to craft and use a robust run of show to keep the event on track. First off is the pain points. Creating and managing a run of show can be challenging, especially for complex events. And one pain point is incomplete or just poorly organized run of show documents. I've seen these sheets that were literally scribbled notes. There's a sparse agenda that says 2 p.m. freight drop with no further details. Like, what freight? Where is it? Where's it going? What equipment is needed? Does it need labor once it arrives? When can we start to move in? Does it need to be there by 2 p.m. or can we gain access at 2 p.m.? Like, what? It's infuriating, and that won't cut it, all right? Remember, smile on the outside though, right? Lack of detail leaves too much room for error. Crew members won't know what comes next or what's needed for each of those deliverables that are listed. And on the flip side, I've also seen run of shows that are like 60 pages long and overly complicated, which can confuse people if they're not structured clearly. And you don't want work orders here, okay? Which should have details on specific objectives. You're looking for global moves, all right? Striking the right balance of detail and clarity is the hard part in creating this. Okay? Make sense? Another pain point that you're going to encounter is last minute program changes. Maybe a speaker's Q&A runs 5 minutes long, or the CEO decides to add an award presentation in the ceremony itself. And these changes can throw off the carefully timed schedule that you've developed. And adjusting the run of show on the fly is tough and can be error prone. Lean on your leaders to provide the art of the possible and let you know what isn't. And what I'll say is lack of rehearsal is a pain point intimately tied to the run of show. You can have a great plan on paper, but if you don't walk through it, at least mentally, if not physically, you may find unanticipated gaps. And what I always like to do is to devote, about 20 minutes to walk through the run of show while on the planning call with my internal team about 30 days out. And all of my team leaders would be on that call, every single one. And we run through top to bottom, bumping the dock to leaving the dock. It provides the opportunity for everyone to speak up and ask additional questions or to throw a wrench into the machine if something just won't work. Not rehearsing or thinking through the transitions or worse, making assumptions, it's a common oversight. Let me throw in the human factor here too. Speakers, VIPs, they don't read and they don't follow the schedule. A panel might run long because no one felt empowered to cut it off, or a speaker might cut a segment short unexpectedly. And dealing with these deviations is a real challenge. And all of these issues essentially boil down to one thing. The plan for the day is either not followed enough or not communicated enough or not followed closely enough. One of those. But now let's talk about when that happens by talking about the symptoms and consequences. When the run of show isn't well crafted or executed, the event experience suffers. Plain and simple, okay? A symptom of this is timing problems. Things either run too long or too short. You might see sessions consistently starting late or running over into breaks, causing a cascading delay. And if the morning ran 20 minutes late, by afternoon, your schedule is a mess unless you've already built in buffers for shortened things on the fly, So planners, please, oh please, allow for interstitial interactions by allowing enough time between event elements. What I mean here is attendees definitely notice when they're released late for lunch, okay? Don't get between a planner and their food. And if they're sitting idle because something else isn't ready on time, well, that's another sign. Another symptom is awkward transitions. How did that feel, huh? That's the hallmark of a poor show flow. A video ends with the lights stay dim and no one comes on stage for 20 seconds. The audience coughs and there's an awkward silence. Cricket. Or folks queued up in the corridor as F&B is furiously pushing buffet tables into place because catering wasn't prepared to start sooner. And those awkward moments are telltale signs of miscoordination. Sorry to say. A particular painful consequence is technical glitches during program segments, which often tie back to run of show issues. Like when the cue for advancing slides or playing music wasn't clear, you might have slides advancing too late or music playing over the speaker that's trying to get a message across. Another consequence here is that important content might be skipped or rushed. And if a panel runs over time, you might have to shorten the Q&A or drop a closing summary. And if freight doesn't arrive for the book signing post-session, not only is the author upset, but the sponsor who paid for the experience, they're pissed. And let's face it, that's just unfortunate because it means attendees, exhibitors, sponsors, and partners don't get the full value. Look, it's not only that. There's also stress and confusion behind the scenes. Crew members might be whispering urgently or running to fix something. Even if the audience doesn't catch all the issues, your team feels it. And that's a real repercussion because stress can burn the last bit of energy, the last little bit that you had stored up, and you could be burnt to a crisp for the rest of the day, for the rest of the event, depending on how bad it goes. One step further, a disorganized run of show can confuse not just staff, but speakers and participants. Have you ever had a speaker say, am I supposed to go now? Because they weren't properly briefed on the flow. It was cringeworthy on stage. And in high stakes events like televised or big keynote sessions, mistakes like that, they can be very visible and embarrassing, especially for sponsors. Don't embarrass yourself or your team. What I'm saying here is just make a clear run of show blueprint, or the day can feel chaotic. You're constantly playing catch up, issuing apology after apology after apology for a delay. Your run of show will look different from my run of show. But just keep in mind that each line should follow the journalistic ideals, if you will. You need to say who is responsible and if they need help, what that person is doing and when they need to be there and how long they have to do it and where they need to do it. Just leave the why for the work orders, though. That's too much detail, really. Now, let's dive further into this. Here's how to create that run of show. And better yet, let's talk about how to actually use it most effectively by talking about actionable resolutions. What do I mean here? Develop a detailed run of show document well ahead of the event, at least 45 days or more, and create a run of show document that lists each segment of the program in chronological order. Please, for each item on this timeline, include the time it's supposed to happen, the item description, and the duration that's allotted for it. I love a start and stop window. That's awesome when dealing with labor. Also want to list the people involved, any cues, prerequisites, or notes. Like books picked up from Acme sponsor booth after booth signing completed at 11 a.m. and booth contact is Jenny at 222-333-4444. And the preferred format for the document is a table or a spreadsheet. And the key is to be specific. If it's a conference day with multiple sessions, your run of show might begin with doors open and include minor details like 8:45 a.m., house music off, and walk-up announcer to podium. Or crew arrives at 6 a.m. Or trailer moved at 6:30, so crew can then blah, 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 blah. You get it, right? This might seem granular, but the idea is that anyone reading it can visualize exactly what should be happening and distribute this document to all stakeholders, everybody. Your internal team, AV crews, the decorator, the DMC, everybody. And this single source of truth keeps everyone aligned. And the best are color coding by vendor responsibility. And I often further color coded mine for different internal teams, say like graphic installers versus speaker queues versus modular system builds versus the freight versus the room set checks, so that it's easy for each person to scan what actually matters to them. What you need to do is lock it in, but have flexibility. Try to finalize the run of show as much as possible 1 week before the event. Locking it in means deco moves are listed and no new elements are being added last minute. Of course,
Minor tweaks happen, but avoid major changes or additions on the event day. They increase risk of error drastically. If a change is unavoidable, content changes, session locations shift due to increased attendee numbers. What you want to do is update the run of show document and immediately redistribute the updated version to everyone, noting what was changed. The best are having a live document with an understood language for changes in the last 24 hours, let's say. And my personal favorite is to push out a text that a change has occurred to XYZ session at X time on the run of show document. Edits made are in red text and require verbal acknowledgement of receipt of text and understanding the change from each of the vendors that are touching that and that have responsibilities in that line item. That's important. Everybody needs to acknowledge it. Now, while we lock the plan, we also know events are fluid. So build a little flexibility into your schedule. Maybe schedule a 2-minute video while speakers are prepped and swapped and stages reset, or plan for unstructured in-between or interstitial moments to allow for folks to collaborate with their neighbor before you bring them back into focus. This buffer can absorb any slight overrun. The benefit is that everyone gets a breather and they're prepared for what's to come. This is going to sound silly, but if you run late early, you can harvest some of that time to catch up later. In essence, lock the intended script, keep a plan B in your pocket, because this is ultimately a game of MacGyver, not machine fabrication here, all right? Run the whole machine, not just the stage. Planners, go beyond the pre-con, please. Block a 2 to 3 hour window on site. This sounds ridiculous, but hear me out. What you need to do is have the full spectrum operational run through that engages every supplier: deco, F&B, freight, registration, security, and EMS, transportation, venue, IT, AV, sponsors, and your fellow show management. Now, a planner doesn't need to do all of this themselves. But if you bake this into the schedule for your vendors and captains, they're forced to run through the motions themselves. And it might feel like pulling teeth for those that aren't familiar with this process. But when something is spotted, and it always is, it pays off in the final product of the event. Start where the attendee journey starts or your supplier journey starts, the loading dock or the shuttle drop-off. From there, you want to progress chronologically. Have dock access for a pallet to move? Can you scan a sample badge through the RFID portals once they're actually installed? Can you push a real update to the event app? And another thing that you can do is test the Wi-Fi in public zones and actually make sure that it actually is on. Check a breakout room flip. Pour a signature drink for a staff toast in your office. Test the F&B team. Allow early install for a sponsor activation, with the blessing of the GSC and everybody that's involved. But the good thing about that is that it will run through the full gamut of what you're going to encounter for the rest of the event without really pissing people off. At each stop, force a controlled failure. I mean, don't burn cash, but test for weaknesses based on attendee survey feedback at the last event. What things went wrong, and try to recreate that right now, if you can, for any of those things. The point of this is to have on-duty operators practice the recovery and then logging the actual time to green status. And speaking of operators, the flow chart that we mentioned earlier, let's dive into usage now to create a captain to command reporting loop. You should already have an assigned captain or a lead for each functional zone: deco, F&B, show services and security, transportation, registration, tech, venue ops. The list goes on and on and on. But during the run through, captains check items off their bespoke lists and record outcomes in a shared scorecard. Pass, warn, fail, fix time, and here's the owner. Immediately afterward, they send failure notifications and remedies over to the planner. To keep chatter down, only reds and ambers get airtime. Greens stay in the log for reference. The event director allocates resources, approves spend, sets deadlines, and schedules a quick retest, verification of any of the critical fixes on their schedule. This tiered, data-driven loop keeps decision makers focused on genuine tasks and prevents issues from hiding in the seams between vendors, and ensuring that the entire machine of the event, from the freight to F&B to first aid, will open doors flawlessly. And on the subject of airtime, let's talk about time management during the event. Once show day is live, someone needs to be actively managing the clock. Often this is a stage manager in a presentation or a keynote space, but Across the entire event, this should be a designated right hand. This person has the run of show in hand, usually with actual time of day noted next to each item. And they're tracking whether you're ahead or behind. Equip that person with a reliable clock or just give them a really good backup battery that they can stick in their pocket easily. What they'll do is they will give cues like wrap up the Q&A to a moderator or signal a speaker when time is almost up. This could be via cue light or even a gentle walk-on by the host, or they're actually picking up the phone and calling that vendor. And for the rest of the vendors and suppliers, use the daily check-ins for as much as you can. But do reach out for items that require fast answers or that will require a big shift on the supplier's side. And if in doubt, over-communicate to the supplier or all suppliers if you think there will be repercussions globally across the event. I'm talking about things like protests or damage or other emergencies. The trick is to communicate any on-the-fly adjustments to all relevant parties. Don't make a solo unilateral move unless all other options are off the table, because we're all woven together when we're on site. And it goes like this. If a panel ends 15 minutes early and you decide move up the coffee break and the catering manager says, yeah, there's no problem. They're ready to push in early if needed. And if the timelines are tight, your decorator or your GSC may not be ready with the sponsor display for the coffee break, which would infuriate that really integral sponsor. Go with the flow, yes, but actively manage time, coordinate with the larger team in a smart manner, and keep the event flow smooth to enable the best attendee user experience. Let's recap what we've learned here with the run of show. You orchestrate the experience so that it feels seamless to attendees. No. They won't see the detailed timeline. Sorry. But they will feel the results. A smoothly flowing event where one thing glides into the next on schedule with no uncomfortable pauses or rushed endings. The entry, the interstitial, and exit all flow cohesively. And this level of execution not only impresses attendees, but also stakeholders, like your executives or your clients. It shows professionalism at the end of the day. Plus, it reduces your stress on the day because you've already mapped out what should happen when. And as the saying goes, plan the work and then work the plan. Another saying on the labor side goes like this, though. Chaos is cash, meaning that if you don't have things buttoned up, you layer on labor hours to figure it out. A 150-person labor call, literally burning $155 per minute, is not the time to figure out if we should move the table in front of this door or this door. Oh, let's move it and see. I mean, as long as you're willing to pay, I guess the sky's the limit, right? No. Even with the best laid plans, life happens. I get it. Murphy's Law really loves to visit events. A critical part of on-site execution excellence is being ready for that unexpected, though. That's where risk management and redundancy planning come in. Let's move on to how to prepare for those curveballs. The ones that can and do show up. Risk and redundancy planning. No matter how experienced you are, every good planner or supplier has that little voice in the back of their mind asking, what if? What if the power goes out? What if our keynote speaker's flight is canceled? What if the truck is delayed by traffic? What if it catches on fire? What if the driver's, oh my God, all the things. Risk and redundancy planning is about listening to that little tiny voice and preparing answers for everything. Basically, it's the practice of identifying potential problems, aka risks, that could impact your event, and building backup plans, aka redundancy and contingencies, to either prevent those issues or respond effectively if they occur. In this section, we'll outline common fractures in risk planning and what can go wrong if we neglect this area and how to build a rock-solid foundation of risk management and backup strategies that give you peace of mind to not only make it to the event day, but to the run of the entire event. That's the goal. Let's get through the whole thing, not just the start. Pain points. All right. A big pain point here is simply acknowledging the need for risk planning amongst a busy planning process. And let's face facts. Planning for problems isn't the fun part of event design. And it often gets deprioritize when time is tight, and planners might have a false sense of security. We've never had a medical emergency at our conference, so why spend time on that scenario? It's kind of like planning for sustainability, as much as I hate to say it. You can put it on the back burner until someone calls you out for it. And that mindset can leave you unprepared for when somebody actually does. Too late. Okay, so you're committing time to risk planning. Cool. But now you need to identify the right risks to plan for. There's a huge range here. Safety and security risks, injury, fire, active threats, technical risks, AV failure, internet outage, logistics risks, delayed shipments, vendor no-shows, venue double booking, health risks, environmental risks, weather delays or cancellations. I mean, the list goes on and on. It can be overwhelming to think of everything. And without a structured approach, some planners focus on one or two obvious risks and overlook others that are more likely to create tremendous havoc. And for instance, you might prepare for colder weather with heaters for an outdoor event. Cool. Yeah, warm. But forget to have a contingency if your second shipment of reg lanyards doesn't arrive. And the comfort will mean nothing if folks can't display their badge to get into that event. Whatever it is you're deciding to do, gain stakeholder buy-in for redundancy. Please. Backups often mean extra costs or effort, like renting extra equipment just in case, or contracting a medical EMT to be on site. And it can be hard to convince budget owners to spend on something that, in the best case, never gets used. However, what I will say is not having it can be catastrophic. Allocating items on a required list in descending order of perceived likelihood with hard costs and a realistic cost repercussion will help to make effective decisions. There's also the coordination of risk plans, making sure everyone knows what to do if X happens. And you might have a binder of contingency plans, but if your team hasn't discussed them, they might not execute properly under pressure. And this goes back to the redundancy item from earlier as well. How you organize your documentation and updates to that documentation is extremely important. Many times you'll see that folks are creating a risk management plan one year and then reuse it without updating for new venues or scenarios, and outdated information can be honestly as bad as none at all. Now, let's talk about the ultimate villain in the pain point game, complacency. Just because the last event went fine doesn't mean you can skip risk planning this time. The art of business event planning is knowing that things that go well are things that are unseen, unheard, and unknown. Vigilance to what lurks just around the corner can lead to anxiety if you don't put things into motion. Complacency is that little voice in the back of your mind that says, let's tackle that later when we're not busy. And there it will sit until some unfortunate circumstance forces it to the front burner when you don't have time, information, or money to deal with it proper. So when it's all said and done, properly addressing pain points help you wrestle time constraints. They also help identifying which risks to plan for, justifying the need for coordinating redundancies, and effectively communicating and maintaining those plans. Symptoms and consequences. When risk and redundancy planning is insufficient, you might not notice any symptoms until a crisis hits. Then the consequences are stark, and the obvious one is chaos during an emergency or problem. Science shows that when you're in an emotionally heightened state, you're unable to make pragmatic choices that are based on reasoning. Chaos is a fast lane to emotions taking the wheel. So do what you can to mitigate that prior to planning. The delays and diversions on site could literally be life and death extreme cases. We often deal with millions of pounds of freight, fast-moving, heavy equipment, large crowds with their own crowd psychology. And traditionally in a business, if you put focus into what matters most first, the rest will fit in as they may. In the scenario of business events, though, you need to think for and plan for both. Because it doesn't take much for a crowd to follow someone that looks like they know where they're going, right? Don't believe me? Well, the next time you see me in person, ask me how I was almost mobbed while directing queue line traffic for a Tom Hanks keynote. It was no bueno, okay? Here's a severe one. Event interruption or failure. Some dramatic examples here, a venue power outage with no backup generators could end your event at dusk. A lost or corrupted presentation file with no backup, and a labor strike at your venue, so nothing moves. Reputational damage is a huge consequence. Attendees and stakeholders have long memories when an event is marred with a fiasco. Imagine an attendee heading to social channels to post something like this: standing outside in the rain because the conference had no bad weather plans. Dozens of us, so not good. Lack of risk planning can also hit the bottom line, and you might incur massive unexpected costs when reacting ad hoc. If the offsite catering vendor doesn't show and you have no backup, you might overspend on ordering takeout for 500 people last minute, or worse, go without food and really, really piss everybody off, while also having to issue refunds and other appeasements. There's also legal and safety liability. If someone gets hurt and it's shown that the event didn't have basic emergency protocols, that's a problem. The stakes are high. The symptom of poor risk planning is usually revealed by the severity of problems when they occur. If you find yourself in crisis mode frequently, making panicked phone calls like, "Where can we find a replacement speaker right now?" that's a sign you need better contingency planning. On the flip side, if you have strong risk plans, often the outside world never knows there was a problem because you solved it swiftly. And without those, the consequence is an obvious public blemish on the event. It's a tightrope act, though. I feel you, because it's hard to communicate what goes wrong behind the scenes without showboating or making yourself look bad in the process. It's all a part of just getting it done, no matter what. And that's what we do. Effective risk and redundancy planning is your own private insurance, okay? You hope you don't need it, but you'll be glad to have it when you do, to create actionable resolutions. Here's how to defend your event against the unexpected. Conduct a risk assessment. Start in the planning phase by conducting a risk brainstorm or assessment session. Look, not a part of your planning meeting, but as a means of focused effort to talk through all that can go wrong. A meeting of its own. Gather your team and possibly venue reps or other key vendors that you have that are pulling off the event, and ask the question: what could go wrong in every aspect of your event? And keep asking until the room goes silent. List everything you can think of. Look at things that are adjacent to those items, and then bring in and use historical data, like if previous events had near misses, or if there is a post-event survey that you can lean on for extra data sources. Then assess likelihood and impact for each. Ask questions like, how likely is this going to happen? How severe will things be if it does? Focus on high impact items, even if low likelihood, and the high likelihood items, even if they have low impact. The point of this process is to ensure that you aren't blindsided by something you could have foreseen. And it's not an effort to feed into generalized anxiety disorder, which is a mental health condition that's characterized by excessive, persistent, and unrealistic worry about everyday things. And this should act as a device to actually reduce anxiety through the act of pre-planning for cause and effect and classification of likeliness. To make life easier, we've built the RISE Rapid Risk Matrix, the mouthful. And what it does is it surfaces top vulnerabilities and their safety nets in just a few minutes. RISE stands for regear, influx, as in unplanned surges, staff, and evacuation scenario. I say evacuation scenario because just like riding a motorcycle, you need to always look for your exit for the worst case scenario, if all goes to hell in a handbasket, that is. Remember, worksheets are always free and it can be found at alphatooth.com. It'll save you time and keep you organized doing it on your own. And you can bypass the need for a full-on facilitated session. And if you don't have the depth in the remedy areas, that's when you would need to tap a subject matter expert to poke holes in the resolutions that you proposed. Let's tackle the worksheet together. We're going to convert each risk row into a ready play, aka contingency planning. For every high or recurrent medium entry on your RISE sheet, draft a one-line action script in the same row. If X, then Y, and here's the owner. Think speaker flight grounded. Move to beaming the keynote in via video chat, and executive producer's responsibility. Attendee medical emergency, security radios code Panda, and EMT stationed at Dock 3 intercepts EMS. And then the pre-written evacuation script rolls, and it's security captain's ownership. You keep contact numbers, rally points, and comms channels on that same line so that the script never lives in a separate space. Now, let's bake redundancy into gear, data, and people. The matrix highlights single points of failure and pair each with a tangible spare. International supplier and local supplier delivering split portions of sponsor giveaways. Cross-train one floater per crew tier and log their names beside the primary owner in the staff safety net column. Store a backup binder or digital folder, your floor plans, contracts, run of show snapshot, and list its location right on the matrix. Okay, now drill the matrix and build muscle memory in the gym of what ifs. Plans on paper equal half credit. Each daily huddle, you want to pick one high impact row and test the staff on the script. Also, test availability of the ASAP resources that you have with a friendly check-in call to make sure that they're ready and waiting. And they're actually there. Repetition turns the RISE sheet from just paperwork into something that is actual real muscle memory. I really want you to normalize risk talk to build a culture of continuous improvement. Mount the latest RISE grid on the ops wall and pin a QR link in the team chat so that every captain carries it and have it in their pocket. Open each of the daily shift meetings that I talked about with reds and ambers, and then you close those with new near misses to feed back into the matrix and keep adding to it. Because what happens is you get a dopamine spike from crossing off the line items as their potential triggers pass during the daily meetings. What I mean is, if a RISE line item is tied to opening general session, let's say, and you're done with that session, cross it off. As you move closer and closer to move out, you'll have less and less to worry about. And being able to see what matters is what's most important. And remember, when you're in HQ planning for an event 10 to 12 months out, and you're pitching leadership to join you for a risk management meeting, frame RISE as brand and budget insurance. Think about it this way. Proactive risk lines cost pennies. Reactive fixes cost reputation and much, much lower. Review insurance clauses and vendor force majeure language against the high impact rows to lock the financial backstop for you. Look, if someone fails to attend, fails to pay attention to the detailed plans that were distributed, and then chooses to question why we are where we are, I grant you full permission to give them an "I told you so," because they aren't being a good partner. By internalizing RISE into contingency scripts, redundancy planning, drills, and culture, the goal is that you turn risk management from a stress builder into a stress reliever by removing the ambiguous cloud that surrounds many of these things and give every stakeholder the confidence that even when the wheels wobble off the ride, it's going to stay upright. We've now covered 4 of the big pillars: logistics, crew, run of show, and risk assessment. There's one more critical element to ensure all these systems continue to work smoothly: training your team, especially new members, on these practices. Because even if you have the A team that has all the experience, they turn quickly into the F team when you add a few new people to the mix to handle increased workload. So let's dive in to discuss how to onboard and educate team members so that knowledge and excellence are passed on consistently. Training new team members on these systems. Henry Ford said, "The only thing worse than training your employees and having them leave is not training them and having them stay." An organization is only as strong as its people. I think event teams are special in that this applies even more to them. We can have the best checklist, the fanciest software, and the perfect risk plan. But if our team, particularly newcomers, don't know how to use them or the why behind their use, those tools and plans, they fall flat. I'm going to tell you a secret. Training new team members is the secret sauce behind consistently successful events. We're going to outline the pain points around bringing new staff or volunteers even up to speed and the real world consequences of poor training on your event day, and actionable ways to effectively train and integrate newcomers into your on-site execution system to build a well-oiled event cranking machine. Okay, here's the friction, the pain points. High turnover or focusing on temporary staffing is a killer. We often have interns, volunteers, or new hires assisting with events, and these folks might not stick around for years. And with the hospitality labor shortages that we're seeing, many planners are working with new team members who have less experience than their predecessors. And the tribal knowledge that a veteran crew had may not exist in a new team. And losing institutional knowledge is a huge issue. McKinsey had a study where they observed that over recent years, many organizations saw critical talent leave and chains of knowledge get broken in the process. I'm sure you've seen it. That's happening in events too. Longtime coordinators or veteran laborers retired or left, and they weren't there to mentor the next generation. So new team members might be starting from scratch on things that used to be second nature to the team. And there's a big shift in geographic knowledge, especially in local labor markets that support events that come into their own backyard. Another pain point is time constraints for training, right? Events are deadline driven, and often new hires are thrown into planning cycles midstream. How many of you have handed a clipboard to a volunteer 10 minutes before things go live and given a 2-minute orientation? Let's be real. Not ideal, but it happens when formal training wasn't in place. When there's nothing there, you just make do, and that's the beauty of our industry. We pave a path forward. All right, but I recently volunteered to help out my friends over at PCMA for their EduCon event in Louisville, and we had several training sessions to understand the content, our personal responsibilities in the schedule. I felt at ease and empowered managing a session room for the day. Now, this task was relatively simple, but that's because they had prepared with meticulously detailed reports for us to use. And they put in the time up front to reduce the training time that was needed even. And without dedicated time, training becomes ad hoc and inconsistent, right? Also, lack of standardized training materials is it's just a problem. If you don't have checklists, manuals, or SOPs documented, each new person gets a slightly different verbal briefing or just learns by trial and error. And training by shadowing works in a smaller organization where there's only one person in the role. But when you have multiple peers in the role, that can lead to what I call franchise hell, where each person is doing things in their own way. And you're rolling the dice on whether or not that's the efficient way. The way that fits into the organizational needs, where each person is doing things in their own way. And you're rolling the dice on whether or not that's the efficient way, the way that fits into the organizational needs. Or ultimately, if they're doing their job in a way that adds friction to their own work. And this can lead to uneven understanding. There's a Sally Sue way of sponsor relations, and there's a Jim Bob way of sponsor relationships, and there's a Tina way of sponsor relations. The complexity of modern event tools can cause so much friction as well. Technology is great, but new team members may need to learn your event management software, registration systems, mobile apps, and so on. And if they're not tech savvy or not given proper training on your particular tech stack, they may underutilize or misuse these tools. I have yet to see any organization with the same exact tech stack as another, even among competitors. You can similarly match your peers, but you'll have slightly different objectives and your stakeholders will have different needs. Technology allows for efficiency in the way that you are currently doing things, or to create a bridge to not have to do something at all. And you still need to know how to do the thing though, and what the motivator is. That's what needs to be trained in the process, and what many miss. Remember, a hammer works really great on nails, not so much on screws. Resistance to change is another pain point that peaks its head. Like when your organization adopted a new crew management system or communication method, and older team members stick to the old ways, making it confusing for newbies who were taught only the new. And it creates cliques and creates gaps. And let's not forget, senior planners themselves are extremely busy. Carving out time to train someone can feel like a luxury when you're knee deep in logistics, maybe eyeballs deep. And it's a game of capacity. Looking ahead to see where the point of failure will be if you don't spend 2 hours of training now. Because the accumulation of 15 minutes of extra work on the task that one thing will replace will result in 9 hours of accumulated workload. You'll value giving 2 hours of training now instead of pulling an all-nighter to process that change order later. Finally, sometimes leadership underestimates the importance of training. I hate to say it. Assuming that because someone is experienced in hospitality, they'll pick it up as they go. There is a realm of possibilities where that might occur, but I ask this: at what cost? Did you delay knowing that someone wasn't a fit for the organization by 6 months? You don't just lose the 6 months. You lose the 2 months to recruit, the 1 month to hire, the 3 months to acclimate them with your team, and also the rippling effect of 6 months delay in moving forward with other initiatives that the other 3 people who are delaying their projects because they needed to step in for coverage of that role. So by the time metric, it's a year's delay. And from the revenue perspective, it could mean up to 8 times revenue gap. And pulling data from McKinsey again, they found that in complex roles, a top performer delivers something like 800% more output than an average one. I want that to sink in. 800%. The lost revenue potential is a ridiculous 7/8 of the revenue that one seat should have generated. And that's not taking into account the effects of the ripple, the dip in efficiency of the others that were stepping in. That could be catastrophic. Does that drive it home for you? Is it sinking in now? All of these pain points can lead to undertrained staff who are not fully prepared to execute the event to your standards. That's a service failure. Ready to dive deeper into symptoms and consequences? Cool. When new team members aren't properly trained, you'll notice inconsistent execution. And one staffer might be fantastic at handling attendee questions because they've done it before, while another new hire gives out wrong information or seems unsure, making an attendee frustrated. Case in point, I popped up to registration at a recent event and asked if it was possible to see the attendees from a session. I couldn't remember the names of 2 people I had fantastic conversations with. It sounds stupid, but a lot of names were floating around. But I wanted to go deeper down the rabbit hole. And one reg staff said, sure, we could probably print that off for you. And if you can't find it, then let me pass it over to Tim. And once he's done talking with that person over there, I say, cool. And I wait 3 to 4 minutes. And once Tim finishes, he says that actually attendee lists aren't accessible. And then the first person I talked to chimes in and says, oh, yeah, we don't usually have access to attendee information until well after the events, actually. I say politely, no worries. Figured it was a long shot. Thanks anyways. But in my head, I'm thinking, you guys need to get on the same page. I just wasted a few valuable minutes between sessions. Another symptom you'll see is repeated mistakes or missteps. For example, maybe new crew members don't follow the communication protocol because they weren't taught clearly. You know, they forgot to radio in a problem or they contact the wrong person. This can slow down issue resolution by parking a problem in a cul-de-sac for a bit until someone notices and then redirects it somewhere else. Another symptom is an over-reliance on a few experienced individuals. And if newbies aren't up to speed, the veterans end up being bottlenecks, doing more or answering every question, which can overwork them and create single points of failure. I can unfortunately say that I've seen this many times where a senior planner will be the single source for too much information and that they end up getting 3 hours of sleep a night. That's just a recipe for disaster in a multi-day event. If you're one of those people that say, I'll sleep when I die, I've been in your shoes, okay? Check out the Return on Wellness podcast with David Stevens. It was one called Unlocking the Power of Sleep for Event Professionals. It'll change your mind. Please, check it out. Anyways, the signs of this pop its ugly little head in the form of a manager who can't even take a lunch break because every 5 minutes, a different new staffer runs over asking, what should I do about XYZ? That's a training gap in the organization. And in the worst case, lack of training can directly cause failures in the systems that we've talked about. For example, you might have a great risk plan, but a new team member didn't know it existed. So when a minor incident occurs, they don't follow the plan and things escalate or get handled wrong, causing more work, more people, and cause bigger financial repercussions. A more subtle consequence is low team morale and competence. Creeps there below the surface. New members who feel lost or make mistakes might become discouraged, feeling like they're not contributing or even hurting the event. And this can lead to higher turnover, where they leave because they feel unsupported, or low engagement from those new team members. It also could create tension between older and newer staff if errors happen repeatedly and aren't surfaced in beneficial ways. Here's the biggest consequence in my book: lost efficiency. Trained employees can do tasks faster and better. When tackling training, the two metrics that I like to think of is the time to first flight and the time to full flight. The time to first flight is when training wheels come off of the bike, when they know who does what and what they don't know and who to go to for answers. The full flight effect is when they can operate with autonomy and are grooving in their role so much that they can step in and fill the gaps in adjacent areas. If someone isn't trained, tasks take longer or need to be redone by someone else, which is costly in the crunch of an event. There's also the reputational aspect. If someone on your team mishandles something in front of stakeholders due to ignorance, it reflects on the overall organization's professionalism. Basically, the consequence of poor training is that all the wonderful systems we put in place can break down because the people operating them aren't fully equipped to do so. It's like having a race car and putting a driver in who doesn't know how to drive stick shift. The car is capable, but boy, oh boy, will the performance suffer. Okay, enough with the doom and gloom, and let's move on from identification to the fun part, the doing. Let's talk about actionable resolutions. Training doesn't have to be a massive formal program, though that can be really nice, I will say. It just has to be thoughtful, consistent, and ongoing. Let's talk about how to get new and existing team members up to speed on your processes and systems. Create a new team member onboarding checklist. Whenever someone new joins the team, whether it's a full-time hire, contractor, or just a really key volunteer, have a checklist of topics and systems to cover with them, please. At minimum, this should include an introduction to your overall planning cycles, an overview of roles, and an org chart is what we're aiming for, but a directory with roles works great here too. And the key logistics of upcoming events and walkthroughs of any specific tools in your tech stack, like your event management software, registration platforms, radio protocols, or anything like that. The goal is for you to provide information overload at the 10,000-foot level. Allow opportunities to ask questions and find out what they don't know and figure out what you've been assuming all along, and repetitively circle back with more detailed topics within the bigger areas that are introduced. Think of them as surgical knowledge strikes from the subject matter experts and the leaders in your organization. Specifically, for on-site execution, make sure you explain the systems that we've discussed in this module. Seriously, go through your logistics plan and how to use it. Show them the typical run of show from a past event. So much knowledge is baked into that. Explain how the chain of command and crew communication methods work, and review your emergency procedures. It's a lot of information, so give it in digestible chunks and provide written reference materials so that they can go back to it. And this onboarding should happen before the person is thrown into a live event whenever possible, or client facing. Even a half-day orientation can make a huge difference for those entry-level items. Include hands-on elements. Maybe they can shadow a planning meeting or do a site visit as part of training. And also, give them a chance to ask questions and clarify things. The goal is to shorten the learning curve by proactively teaching, rather than them learning only by mistakes or just what they encounter. Now, let's talk about what they're learning from. Let's develop training materials and SOPs. When you document a process, create 2 categories of complementary SOPs so that anyone from a CAD designer back in the shop, somebody in the warehouse, to a runner of the show at 2 a.m., they can all follow the same playbook. And these 2 SOPs are your technical manual and your field manual. The technical manual is the deep dive version for specialists, audio engineers, network admins, riggers, freight coordinators, catering, even sustainability leads. It spells out every step with wiring diagrams, granular specs, software screenshots, compliance references, and a change log for version control. The AV director, venue IT manager, or decorator ops lead typically owns this manual, and we keep a locked PDF in the project hub, plus a printed copy in the command center for those key items. Now, the field manual is the quick reference guide you post at Ops HQ, and clip it to lanyards if you can. It's color-coded and full of checklists and decision trees and QR codes that jump to short videos if you have them. The field manual stays at the 10,000-foot view, and the technical manual is at the ground. Floor managers, registration captains, security supervisors, and volunteer leads carry it so that they can solve problems in real time without flipping through pages and pages and pages of fine print technical procedures. The field manual is a quick reference to take them off in specific technical manuals for those areas that they need. See how the 2 play together? Across both manuals, capture every discipline of event execution. If you're starting from scratch and trying to figure out where to start, here are a few. For registration, note badge layouts, RFID gate calibration, and nightly data exports. For freight marshaling, dock schedules, crate labeling, and union break rules. For rigging and scenic, include point load charts, truss color codes, and daily lift inspections. For AV, detailed on broadcast, map game structure, asset tags, and strike order, and live stream and captioning checks. IT and cybersecurity need VLAN diagrams, guest Wi-Fi throttling steps, and escalation trees. Catering and F&B should cover food safety regulation logs, allergen signage, compost instructions, and the last call script. Transportation and mobility require shuttle GPS links, ADA ramp protocols, and rideshare geofences. Venue operations and sustainability include HVAC setbacks, dumpster divergence targets, and post-event audits. Risk and emergency sections map AED locations, shelter charts, protest route intel, and post-incident debrief forms. Build each SOP once, then maintain it forever. I like a live document, building on a secure Google Doc that is labeled, categorized based on who approved the SOP, when it was last approved, and for what training level it should be used. You can then feed that into your favorite AI as a knowledge base to then have an ever-current resource for your team to tap into. By tagging every document with an owner, a version date, and the next review milestone, you can do continuous sweeps of SOP updates. It's all baked into how you build it. What I'll say is, to have team buy-in, make sure that you have subject matter experts creating these SOPs and have veterans co-author sections. So tribal knowledge gets captured and conflicting habits get ironed out before you hit the floor. And after each show, log near misses, redline the manual, and publish fresh versions before the next load in or before the next peak period. It's important to streamline this process in particular so that you can drop pain points or broken processes while you're on site, and you can seek out resolutions later when you actually have time to digest. Technical manuals give your experts the depth that they crave, while the field manuals give the wider crew the speed that they need. It's a beautiful thing. The recent inclusion of AI like Notebook LM can help to allow your team to easily Google internal knowledge and have a quasi trainer without having to tie up the resources of an actual team leader, because the information is being sourced from the best possible place. The communal knowledge of subject matter experts that you've built into the SOPs. The team leaders and subject matter experts are still there, but less time is spent on the one-on-one level and more time spent on the more intricate knowledge sharing that's required at the upper levels. Both aspects of the SOP turn turnover, temp labor, and middle of the night brain fog into non-issues because they really enable new team members to perform as if they've been on tour all season long. Now that we've built the bones for the training, let's jump into what to do from there. One of the most effective training methods in the events industry is on the job shadowing. Pair new team members with experienced ones for critical tasks leading up to and during an event. You've probably been doing this by default already, right? Like if you have a new technical coordinator, you have them shadow your seasoned stage manager during a rehearsal and on show day. They'll learn by watching and doing under supervision. A new logistics coordinator might shadow the freight lead at the loading dock on setup day to see how deliveries are received, rather than being dropped at the freight desk with a blank form. Mentorship is its own special sauce, and it can be more formal too. Assign each new hire a buddy or a mentor on the team who checks in with them regularly. You want them to answer questions and just review their work. And this transfer of knowledge person to person is invaluable, and also helps integrate the newcomer socially into the team. And ideally, this mentor is not a person who is their manager and provides somewhat of an impartial place for them to feel confident and confiding in them. It's important that mentors teach not just the what and how, but the why, the reasoning behind the process. And what I mean is they'll explain things like why we require visual proof that a room has set proper to specs, not just go do it. Understanding the why helps new team members make good decisions in novel situations by applying the same principles. When you're training, make sure you have a gradual increase in responsibility. It's wise to phase in new team members' responsibilities as their competence grows. Maybe on their first event, a new team member is given a small piece of the puzzle to own, under guidance, of course. And after they've seen a full cycle, they can lead a larger segment next time. And this staged approach prevents overload and builds confidence. It also provides natural feedback points. After each event or phase, sit down and discuss what went well and what they need more help with. Learning from real events is crucial. So treat each as a learning experience, not just a pass-fail test. What we've seen in several event suppliers is that it takes about 3 years to be fully moving and grooving in someone's role. You can cut that time in half with translatable experience, but that's the exception rather than the norm, even if they're coming from a competitor. This process should be thought of as continuous training and knowledge sharing. Training shouldn't be one and done. Make it ongoing. The events industry evolves and best practices change. Think about it. 2020 changed the game 5 years ago. AI is changing the game right now. What's next? There are always new tools. So the solution for that is to keep your team, new and old, learning continuously. This means regularly scheduled internal debriefs where you analyze what went wrong or right and document lessons from there. Or sending staff to industry workshop webinars from PCMA, MPI. Something else you could do is just go through a short refresher before each event. Pick a random SOP that affects a large part of the organization and run through that. Make sure you're saving time to encourage experienced team members to share their tips and hacks that they've learned over time and to be able to contribute into it. You need to go through a process of intentionally keeping the culture one of learning. And so many COOs and operations leaders and businesses are heavily investing in training to address skill gaps. A recent PwC survey pegged 46% of COOs are training existing talent to fill capability gaps. There's an extreme value to upskilling, especially in operations. We should mirror that in events by upskilling our teams regularly. But that just makes them attractive to competitors, right? I mean, true, but it also makes them attractive to clients as well, right? And if you're building a culture that they don't want to leave, what are you worrying about? Here's a tough one now. How do you document and retain knowledge? Just in case you've been hiding under a rock, we're in an industrial data revolution right now. And given the turnover issue, make sure after each event, key knowledge is captured. And what I mean is you should update your training materials with any new scenarios encountered. In one of my previous roles, because we would have over 500 events a year, we would meet
once a quarter with department leads to put items into action. And someone was monitoring the submissions, though. So it was like, if there was an ASAP item, like for safety or for big cost repercussions, we had the ability to move heaven and earth to make the needed adjustments. We didn't have to wait for that quarter review. And if a new team member with fresh eyes figured out a better way to handle something, incorporate that for future training. Even after years of refining, it wasn't often that I found less than like 3 items every time I set foot on the event floor. It was easy when we had a system to capture it, process, and put it into action. Another tip is to maintain an archive of past event run of shows, logistics plans, work orders, freight check-ins, labor sign-in sheets. It goes on, so that new folks can study them as examples. Keep that, please. And another trick is to create a glossary of event terms or acronyms for newbies. Every industry has its jargon. I mean, a forklift, for example, could be called a tow motor or a lift truck or a high-low or apparently a jitney. Thanks, Google, for that one. All right, look, I know I've talked on it already, but if you have the bandwidth, turn your best practices into a concise playbook or a micro e-learning module, and then feed every version, technical manuals, field checklists, run of shows, freight logs, staffing charts, everything, every single thing, all into, let's say, Notebook LM. It's not a paid sponsorship, I promise. I just dig it, and it works. And think of Notebook LM as your private search engine. It eats PDFs and spreadsheets and photos and white papers and audio transcripts from recorded meetings and indexes them so that the entire organization can pull answers in seconds from the entire knowledge base. Association planners mapping breakout resets, corporate producers tracking sponsor entitlements, or deco suppliers juggling rigging points, or just the nuance of all of the information that's coming through. You'll all be querying the same, always current knowledge base. Again, inside the platform, tag each upload by event type, venue, discipline, and review date. And if you're a registration lead, you can ask, show me every badge reprint workaround we've used at expos over 10,000 attendees. And what it'll do is land on a step-by-step fixes with source links back into the document. Let's say you're a transportation manager. You can search for shuttle geofence rules at convention centers with more than, 4 loading bays. And what will happen is it'll surface past SOPs plus the GPS maps that have been stored if you put them all there. Notebook LM can even draft first pass glossaries, training decks, or updated playbook chapters from the content that you store. So your team leaders spend their energy refining instead of reinventing the wheel of how to actually put all of this together and reorganize. And look, the payoff is permanence. When a veteran retires, a contractor jumps to other projects, or a temp crew rotates out, their know-how stays put, searchable, and version controlled. McKinsey warned losing operational memory erodes performance. So locking that memory into an AI readable notebook means every new hire accelerates from rookie to reliable far faster, and seasoned pros waste less time answering, where's that doc? And when we invest in training new team members on these systems, we're really investing in the future success of our organization and the events that they service. I mean, that's ultimately why I'm here. That's my goal and my metric for success or failure. Are you just operating smoother? That's it. Did the event kick off easier? Well, my friend. A well-trained team translates into events that run smoother with less oversight, and it future-proofs the organization against staff changes. It takes real effort to build the machine to train them and keep them trained, though. And it's not hard. It just requires focused attention every now and then. Plus, team members who are well-trained feel more confident and valued, which improves retention and performance. I go as far to say that training is the ultimate force multiplier. Every hour spent training can save many hours of trouble on site. And if you take nothing else from this section, maybe just create a culture where everyone is both a student and a teacher. New members learn from veterans, and sometimes new folks bring fresh ideas or tech savviness that can teach the old dogs new tricks too. So, encourage questions, curiosity, and the attitude that no one is expected to know it all right. away. But also that everyone is expected to continuously learn. The goal is not to be the smartest person in the room, but the one who trains the smartest person in the room. That's where the gold is. If everyone's on board with that, you're competing to build each other up rather than a sink or swim scenario. You picking up what I'm putting down now? We've journeyed through the major components of on-site event execution and technical coordination, from the really ugly nitty-gritty of operations to the high-level strategy of risk planning, the human element of team training. Now, let's bring it all together and see how these pieces interconnect to elevate your organization. And by the process, it'll elevate your event. We've covered a lot of ground: operations and logistics, crew management, run of show, risk planning, and training. Each one is a critical gear in the well-oiled machine of a successful event. But let's zoom out and see the bigger picture of how these elements work together. Think of an event like a sandwich. It might sound silly, but hear me out. On-site operations and logistics are the slices of bread. They are the structure that keeps everything from falling apart. And crew management is the spread that coats each slice and makes sure that every layer sticks together in a no-so-nice way. And the run of show is the step-by-step process of assembly, telling you exactly when to lay down the cheese and add the greens and finish with the bun. And risk and redundancy planning are the stack of napkins within arm's reach. And for anyone who has a mustache, you know how important that is. And training new team members is kind of what goes on behind the scenes. That shows you how to use the knife that cut the tomato and not your finger. That lets you know how to pick ripe lettuce in the grocery, put the sandwich on a plate instead of on a dirty counter, and that the sandwich leaves the kitchen to a table, fresh and consistently delicious, hopefully. But enough with the sandwich. You get the point, right? For planners and event service providers, the main takeaway is that excellence on event day doesn't just accidentally happen. It's the result of deliberate systems and preparations that have occurred for years to lead you to that point. The best planners I know are almost paranoid in how they anticipate problems. Yet, they remain profoundly calm when executing because they know they have a plan and a backup plan to that plan. They combine the science, the process, data, best practices with the art, the leadership, decision-making, the experience. When those combine, they deliver great events consistently. Ultimately, improving on-site event execution and technical coordination is about professionalizing every aspect of what we do on-site. If moving to proactive mastery, and by applying the principles we've discussed, you can transform on-site execution from a source of stress and uncertainty to a confident, well-managed operation that attendees and stakeholders can only say, OMG. In a good way, that is. A few housekeeping items, though. If you haven't signed up yet, join the monthly newsletter at alphatooth.com. This is one part of the learning module. These videos function as an intro into the topic, and we always release worksheets, workbooks, AI prompts, and a podcast to tackle each month's pain points. We call it a prescription module because it cures what ails you. Only folks who've signed up for the free newsletter get access. It's just a way for us to fight the algorithm, really, because it's only showing to 10% of our followers. So go sign up, and I promise you won't regret it. Other thing is, find me on LinkedIn. Shoot a connection request. I love to interact there, and that's my social channel of choice. One more thing. If you found value here, even for 30 seconds, it would mean the world to me, literally, if you shared this with just one other person. I legitimately hope this module has given you a broad strategy and concrete tactics to elevate your events. Thank you so much for joining me today. Now, armed with this knowledge and best practices, go forth and build something awesome. You got this. Your next on-site execution can be your best one yet. Go change the world. Bye now.